The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty desk of Detective Sarah Chen at the 43rd Precinct. Her coffee mug, decorated with pictures of her dog Max, sat cold and untouched. Her computer screen remained dark for the second day in a row. This had never happened before, not in her 8 years with the department. Detective Mike Rodriguez, Sarah's partner for the last 3 years, paced back and forth near her desk. His worn leather shoes made soft squeaking sounds on the polished floor. He checked his phone for the 100th time, hoping to see a message from her. Nothing, just like yesterday and the day before that. "Something's wrong," Mike said to Captain James Thompson, who stood nearby with his arms crossed. "Sarah never misses work. She even came in last Christmas when she had the flu." The worry in his voice was clear, like a father concerned about his child. The captain nodded slowly, his gray hair catching the morning light. When was the last time anyone heard from her? He asked, though he had asked this question several times before. Sometimes asking the same question could lead to new answers. Mike pulled out his small notepad, flipping through its pages. 3 days ago, at 7:15 p.m., she called me from her car. Said she was meeting an informant at Riverside Cemetery about the hospital corruption case. He paused, remembering the conversation. She sounded excited, like she had found something big. The corruption case had been Sarah's main focus for the past 6 months. She had discovered strange patterns at City Central Hospital, missing medical supplies, large amounts of money moving through hidden accounts, and patients who disappeared without any records. Every time she got close to something important, the evidence would vanish, almost like magic. Captain Thompson walked to the large window overlooking the busy street below. Did she say who the informant was? No, Mike answered, shaking his head. She was being extra careful with this one. Said they would only talk if she came alone and kept their name secret. He stopped pacing and sat heavily in his chair. I should have gone with her anyway. The captain turned from the window. Don't blame yourself, Rodriguez. Chen knows how to handle herself. He looked at his watch, then made a decision. It's been 48 hours. That's long enough. I'm officially declaring her a missing person. The next few hours turned the quiet police station into a center of activity. Officers gathered around a large whiteboard as Mike wrote down everything they knew. Sarah's photo, showing her serious face and long black hair, went up in the center. Red lines connected different pieces of information, creating a web of clues that all led to that last meeting at Riverside Cemetery. A team of officers searched Sarah's apartment. Everything was in perfect order, just like she always kept it. Her bed was made with hospital corners. Bills were sorted neatly on her desk. Even her shoes were lined up perfectly by the door. The only thing out of place was Max's food bowl. It was empty, and the dog was clearly hungry. Sarah would never leave Max without food. At Riverside Cemetery, another team found Sarah's car parked near the old iron gates. Her phone was on the front seat, its battery dead. A small notebook lay open on the passenger seat, but the pages were blank. In the trunk, they found her gym bag and a box of case files, normal things for a detective to have. Officer Jenny Martinez, a young cop who looked up to Sarah, found something interesting near a group of old graves. Over here, she called out. The other officers gathered around. There, pressed into the soft ground, was a clear shoe print. Next to it lay a small silver necklace, the one Sarah always wore, a gift from her late mother. Back at the station, Mike stood in front of the evidence board, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Something about this felt wrong. Sarah was too smart, too careful to just disappear. If she had found something important about the hospital case, something worth meeting a secret informant for, where was the evidence? Where were her notes? And most importantly, where was Sarah? As the sun set on another day without answers, Captain Thompson made more calls, bringing in state police and the FBI. This wasn't just about a missing detective anymore. This was about one of their own vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only questions and a growing fear that they might never see her again. Little did they know, the truth would be far stranger than any of them could imagine. 3 weeks had passed since Detective Sarah Chen's disappearance. The 43rd Precinct had changed. The usual joking and laughter were gone, replaced by worried whispers and tired faces. Detective Mike Rodriguez hadn't gone home in 2 days. His desk was covered with coffee cups and fast food wrappers. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when the call came in. Officer Jenny Martinez was working at the front desk when the phone rang. The voice on the other end didn't sound human. It was deep and robotic, changed by a computer to hide who was really speaking. "Listen carefully," the voice said. "I know where Detective Chen is." Jenny's hand shook as she pressed the recording button. "Go to Mount Hope Cemetery. Look for a new grave with fresh flowers. A headstone reads Elizabeth Palmer. You'll find your detective there." Jenny's heart beat faster. "Who is this? How do you know about Detective Chen?" The voice continued as if it hadn't heard her. She was getting too close. The hospital's secrets had to stay hidden, but some of us couldn't live with what they did to her. Then the voice said something that made Jenny's blood run cold. "Check the security camera footage from the hospital's back entrance on the night she disappeared. Look for a black van with the license plate starting with XRJ. Only the police knew that Sarah had been investigating City Central Hospital. This caller knew things they had never told the public." Within minutes, the station was alive with activity. Captain Thompson stood in the middle of the room, giving orders. "Martinez, get that recording to tech. I want to know everything about that call. Rodriguez, take a team to Mount Hope Cemetery. And somebody get me that hospital security footage." Mike and 4 other officers raced to Mount Hope Cemetery in 2 police cars. The cemetery was on the other side of the city from where Sarah had disappeared. It was bigger than Riverside Cemetery, with newer graves and better-kept grounds. The morning fog made everything look coastly. They split up to search for the grave. Officer Martinez, who had come with them, spotted it first. "Over here," she called out. The others ran to her location. The grave was exactly as the caller had described. Fresh flowers, white roses, lay on the newly placed dirt. The headstone was clean and new, reading Elizabeth Palmer, beloved daughter and sister, rest in peace. The date of death matched the day Sarah disappeared. Mike pulled out his phone and called the station. "Captain, we found it. What do you want us to do?" "Don't touch anything," Captain Thompson ordered. "I've got a court order coming for exhumation. Forensics is on their way. And Mike, I just watched the hospital footage." The caller was telling the truth. "We found the van." As they waited, Officer Martinez noticed something strange. "Detective Rodriguez," she said, pointing to the flowers. "These roses, they're not just placed here, they're planted. Someone wanted them to grow here permanently." Mike looked closer. She was right. Someone had carefully planted the roses, expecting them to bloom year after year. It was like they were creating a permanent memorial. But why would someone do that for a fake grave? The forensics team arrived with their equipment. As they worked, Mike saw something move behind a nearby stone building. He walked quietly toward it, his hand on his gun, but when he reached the spot, no one was there. All he found was a small piece of paper trapped under a rock. On it was written, "She's alive. Keep looking." Back at the station, things were moving quickly. The security footage showed the black van entering the hospital's back parking lot at 11:42 p.m. on the night Sarah disappeared. 2 men in medical uniforms got out. One opened the side door, and the team could see someone lying on a stretcher inside. The image was blurry, but the person had long dark hair like Sarah's. Captain Thompson gathered everyone in the meeting room. "The van's license plate was fake," he said. "But we found something interesting. That same van has been seen at 3 other hospitals in the state, and each time it appeared, someone from the hospital staff disappeared the next day." Mike stared at the image of the van frozen on the screen. "They're not just hiding Sarah," he said. "They're hiding others too. But why take them to a cemetery? Why create fake graves?" Officer Martinez spoke up. "Maybe," she hesitated. "Maybe they want us to think they're dead. But that note I found says Sarah's alive. What if they're all alive?" The captain looked at the tired faces around him. "Whatever's going on, we're getting closer. Someone on the inside is helping us. They're leaving us clues." He turned to Mike. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start digging." None of them knew that their discovery was just the beginning of something much bigger and much darker than they could imagine. The next morning was cold and cloudy at Mount Hope Cemetery. Yellow police tape surrounded the grave marked Elizabeth Palmer. Teams of officers and forensics experts moved around the site like busy ants. Detective Mike Rodriguez stood watching as workers carefully removed the white roses that had been planted around the headstone. Careful with those flowers, Mike called out. They might have fingerprints. He hadn't slept all night, thinking about the strange phone call and the note he'd found. His coffee cup shook slightly in his tired hands. Dr. Linda Watson, the city's best forensics expert, knelt by the grave. She was checking the dirt with special tools. This is odd, she said, waving Mike over. The soil here is different. It's not just regular cemetery dirt. She held up a handful. There are tiny metal pieces mixed in. Officer Jenny Martinez, who had become a key part of the investigation, took photos of everything. She stopped suddenly and pointed to something shiny in the dirt. Look at this. The forensics team carefully dug it out. It was a small metal tube, like the kind used in hospitals for oxygen. Captain Thompson arrived just as they made this discovery. What have you found? He asked, walking carefully around the grave site. Some kind of medical equipment, Mike answered. Boss, I think we need to open this grave right now. The captain nodded. He had already brought the court order and a team of professionals who knew how to properly open a grave. As they set up their equipment, Mike noticed movement near an old stone mausoleum about 50 feet away. A figure in dark clothes was watching them. Over there, Mike shouted, pointing. Several officers ran toward the mausoleum, but when they reached it, they found only a fresh cigarette butt and a cell phone. The phone screen was locked, but it had a medical symbol sticker on its case, the same logo as City Central Hospital. The work of opening the grave continued. It was slow and careful. Nobody wanted to damage any evidence that might help them find Sarah. As the workers removed the dirt, Dr. Watson noticed something strange. There are wires in the ground, she said. They look like power cables. Everyone grew quiet. Power cables in a grave. That made no sense. Unless... Hurry, Mike ordered the workers. We need to see what's down there. It took another hour to safely reach the coffin. It wasn't a regular coffin. It was larger than normal and had a strange metal box attached to one end. The box had blinking lights, like some kind of electronic device. Officer Martinez took more pictures while Dr. Watson examined the coffin. This is high-tech medical equipment, she said, pointing to the metal box. It looks like some kind of life support system. Mike's heart started beating faster. Are you saying someone could be alive in there? Before Dr. Watson could answer, they heard a beeping sound coming from the coffin. A small green light was flashing on the metal box. Captain Thompson immediately called for medical backup. Get an ambulance here now. The team worked quickly but carefully to open the coffin. The hinges were different from a regular coffin. They were designed to be opened and closed easily. As they lifted the lid, everyone gasped. Inside lay Detective Sarah Chen. She was pale, but didn't look like someone who had been dead for 3 weeks. She was wearing a hospital gown, and tubes ran from her arms to the metal box. A mask over her face was connected to an oxygen supply. Most shocking of all, she had a steady pulse. She's alive, Dr. Watson shouted. But she's in some kind of induced coma. The ambulance arrived with its sirens wailing. As paramedics rushed to help Sarah, Mike noticed something else in the coffin. There was a small notebook tucked into the corner. Inside, written in handwriting he didn't recognize, was a message. More like her. 5 other graves, different cemeteries. Same hospital. Find them before time runs out. Captain Thompson read the message and looked at his team. This just got bigger, he said. Someone's been keeping her alive down here, but why? And who are the others? As they carefully moved Sarah to the ambulance, Mike looked back at the mausoleum where the mysterious figure had been watching. He had a feeling they were still being watched, not just by one person, but by many. Some wanted to help them find the truth. Others wanted to keep it buried forever. The race to save more lives had begun, but they still didn't understand what they were really dealing with. The emergency room at City General Hospital was buzzing with activity. They had taken Detective Sarah Chen to this hospital, not City Central, for obvious reasons. Doctors and nurses moved quickly around her bed, checking the strange medical equipment that had kept her alive in the coffin. Detective Mike Rodriguez paced in the hallway outside Sarah's room. The white hospital walls and strong smell of cleaning products reminded him too much of City Central Hospital, where this nightmare might have started. Officer Jenny Martinez sat nearby, going through photos from the gravesite on her camera. Look at this, Jenny said, showing Mike a close-up picture of the life support system from the coffin. These aren't regular hospital machines. They're custom-made. Someone spent a lot of time and money building this. Dr. Emma Torres, the head of emergency medicine, came out of Sarah's room. She looked troubled. "I've never seen anything like this," she told them. "The equipment keeping her in the coma is very advanced. Whoever did this knows more about medical technology than most doctors." Captain Thompson arrived with 2 FBI agents. "What's her condition?" he asked Dr. Torres. "She's stable," the doctor answered. "They used a new kind of drug to keep her in the coma. It's not even available in most hospitals yet. But here's the strange part. They took very good care of her. No bed sores, no infections. Someone was visiting that grave regularly to check on her." The FBI agents looked at each other. Agent Lisa Parker, the older of the two, spoke up. "We found something interesting about that cemetery. The groundskeeper said he saw someone in medical scrubs visiting that grave every 3 days. Always at night. Always alone." Mike sat down heavily in a plastic chair. "So they weren't trying to kill her. They were keeping her alive. But why? What's the point of burying someone alive if you're going to take care of them?" Just then, a young nurse ran out of Sarah's room. "Dr. Torres, she's waking up." Everyone rushed to the room. Sarah's eyes were fluttering open. She looked confused and scared. Mike moved to her side, holding her hand. "You're safe now, Sarah. You're in the hospital." Sarah tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. The nurse gave her some water. After a few sips, she managed to whisper, "The others. Have to find the others." "What others, Sarah?" Captain Thompson asked gently. "The ones in the other graves?" She nodded weakly. "6 of us. All detectives. All got too close." Her voice was getting stronger. "They're keeping us for something. Heard them talking. Organ matches." The room went quiet. Agent Parker stepped forward. "Detective Chen, are you saying they're keeping people alive as potential organ donors?" Before Sarah could answer, the machine started beeping loudly. Her body began to shake. "She's having a seizure." Dr. Torres shouted, "Everyone out." The medical team worked quickly, giving Sarah medicine to stop the seizure. Outside in the hallway, Mike punched the wall in frustration. "Organ donors. They're keeping people alive in graves to harvest their organs." Jenny showed them another photo on her camera. "Look at this." The coffin had markings on it. Blood type, tissue type, organ condition reports. They're treating these graves like some kind of human storage system. Agent Parker made some calls while her partner took notes. "We're checking records of missing detectives from other cities," she said. 5 have disappeared in the last year. All were investigating cases involving hospitals or medical facilities. Captain Thompson gathered everyone around. "Okay, we need to find those other graves fast. Martinez, get the cemetery records for every burial in the last year. Rodriguez, work with the FBI to identify those missing detectives. And I want guards on Chen's room around the clock." Dr. Torres came out looking tired but relieved. "She's stable again. The seizure was probably caused by the coma drugs leaving her system, but there's something else you should know." She held up a small X-ray. "We found a tiny computer chip implanted in her arm. It's transmitting some kind of signal." Mike looked at the X-ray. "Can you remove it?" "Not yet," Dr. Torres said, "but maybe we can use it. If the other victims had the same implants, we could track them." Jenny finished. "Find the other graves." Suddenly, all the lights in the hospital flickered. When they came back on, Sarah's heart monitor started beeping differently. On its screen, words appeared. "Stop looking, or they all die." Someone was watching them. Someone who could hack into hospital equipment. Someone who still had control over the lives of 5 other buried detectives. The race to save them had just become even more dangerous. The police station's conference room looked like a war room. Maps covered the walls, showing all the cemeteries in a 100-mile radius. Red pins marked where Sarah had been found. Yellow pins showed possible locations of other graves. Detective Mike Rodriguez stood in front of a large whiteboard, adding photos of 5 missing detectives. "Karen Walsh from Boston," he said, pointing to the first photo. "Disappeared while investigating medical supply theft." James Torres from Philadelphia, vanished during a hospital fraud case. Michael Chang from Chicago, Lisa Peterson from Detroit, and Robert Martinez from Cleveland. All gone while looking into cases connected to hospitals. Officer Jenny Martinez typed quickly on her laptop. I found something interesting, she said. All these hospitals use the same medical equipment supplier, NextGen Medical Solutions. And guess who owns NextGen? City Central Hospital's parent company. Captain Thompson circled the connection on the whiteboard. Good work. What about the cemetery records? Jenny pulled up a spreadsheet. In the last year, there were 17 burials that matched the pattern we're looking for. New graves, expensive headstones, regular nighttime visitors. I've mapped them all. She pointed to the yellow pins on the wall. FBI agent Parker walked in with a thick file. We got the personnel records from all the connected hospitals. One name keeps showing up, Dr. Marcus Sterling. He worked at each hospital around the time the detectives disappeared. The room grew quiet. Everyone knew Dr. Sterling's reputation. He was famous for developing new medical technologies. His research had saved thousands of lives. But now his name was connected to something dark and terrifying. Mike pulled up Dr. Sterling's photo on the big screen. The doctor looked friendly, with gray hair and kind eyes behind expensive glasses. How could someone like this be involved in burying people alive? Just then, Sarah's nurse called from the hospital. Detective Rodriguez, Dr. Torres needs you here right away. Detective Chen remembered something important. At the hospital, Sarah was sitting up in bed, looking stronger. The guards outside her room checked everyone's ID carefully before letting them in. Dr. Emma Torres stood nearby, monitoring Sarah's condition. I remember his voice, Sarah said, her hands shaking slightly. Dr. Sterling was there the night they took me. He said I was perfect, a rare blood type and healthy organs. But he said they had to wait for the right buyer. Buyer? Agent Parker asked. They're selling organs to specific buyers? Sarah nodded. Rich people who need transplants but don't want to wait on official lists. They're willing to pay millions. Sterling and his team keep us alive until they find a match. Then, she couldn't finish the sentence. Mike's phone buzzed. It was Jenny. Mike, you need to see this. I'm sending you a video from a security camera at NextGen Medical. The video showed a large warehouse. Men in medical uniforms were loading boxes into black vans, the same kind of van that took Sarah. But what caught everyone's attention was the man supervising everything, Dr. Sterling. That video was taken yesterday, Jenny said over the phone. Those vans left heading north, toward 3 of our marked cemeteries. Captain Thompson made a quick decision. Parker, get search warrants for those cemeteries. Rodriguez, take teams to each location. Dr. Torres will need medical support ready to go. As they prepared to leave, Sarah grabbed Mike's arm. Be careful, she said. Sterling has people everywhere. Hospital staff, cemetery workers, even. She looked around nervously. Even some police. The captain's phone rang. When he answered, his face went pale. The video Jenny found? It's gone. Someone hacked into the police server and deleted it. And they left another message. Time is running out. The buyers are waiting. Mike looked at the cemetery map on his phone. 5 yellow pins. 5 possible graves. 5 lives hanging in the balance. But which locations were real and which were traps? They couldn't dig up every marked grave. It would take too long. Then Sarah remembered something else. The roses, she said suddenly. White roses. They plant them at every grave. It's Sterling's signature. He says it marks his gardens of life. They had a new clue, but somewhere in the city, Dr. Sterling was watching. And he wasn't going to let his garden be destroyed without a fight. Detective Mike Rodriguez and his team reached the first cemetery just as the sun was setting. Oak Grove Cemetery looked peaceful, with its tall trees and old stone walls. But they knew that somewhere among these graves, someone might be lying alive, trapped in a high-tech coffin. Officer Jenny Martinez used her tablet to check the cemetery map. According to the records, there are 3 new graves here with white roses. She pointed to different areas. One by the oak tree, one near the stone angel, and one behind the small chapel. The FBI brought special equipment that could detect electronic signals, like the ones from the tracking chips implanted in the victims. Agent Parker walked slowly between the graves, watching the scanner's screen. Suddenly, it started beeping near the grave by the oak tree. We got something? she called out. The team rushed over with their equipment. But as they got closer, they found something unexpected, a small black box hidden in the roses. Inside was a phone with a recorded message. Dr. Sterling's voice played clearly. "Congratulations on finding my little present. But you're too late. We've already moved the special cargo from this location. Keep searching if you want, but remember, every minute you waste puts another detective closer to meeting their buyer." Back at the hospital, Sarah was working with Captain Thompson and Dr. Torres to understand Sterling's operation. Her memory was getting clearer, and each new detail painted a darker picture. "I remember being in his office at City Central," Sarah said, drawing a rough map on a piece of paper. "He has a hidden room behind his bookshelf. That's where he keeps all the files about his garden, the graves, the victims, the buyers." Dr. Torres looked at the medical documents they had found in Sarah's coffin. These organ matching records are incredibly detailed. Sterling must have a whole team of doctors helping him. No one could do this alone. Captain Thompson's phone rang. It was Mike, calling from the cemetery. After hearing about the recorded message, the captain put the phone on speaker. "Sterling knew we were coming. He's playing games with us." Just then, Jenny burst into Sarah's hospital room, her face excited. "I found it. I know how they choose the locations." She spread out several papers on Sarah's bed. "Look at these property records. Every cemetery they use is owned by the same company, Garden of Peace Holdings." Sarah's eyes went wide. "Wait. I remember seeing that name. It was on Sterling's computer screen the night they took me. He was looking at a list of properties." Jenny nodded quickly. "That's not all. Garden of Peace Holdings was created 5 years ago by, guess who? Dr. Marcus Sterling's wife, Helen Sterling. She died last year, but before that she bought 12 cemeteries in 5 states. The perfect cover, Captain Thompson said. They own the cemeteries, so they can bury their victims without anyone asking questions." Dr. Torres, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Helen Sterling. I remember reading about her death. She needed a heart transplant but died waiting for a match." She turned to her computer and pulled up an old news article. According to this, her death is what inspired Dr. Sterling to start his groundbreaking research into organ preservation. Sarah tried to sit up straighter in her bed. "That's why he's doing this. He couldn't save his wife, so now he's making sure rich people don't have to wait for organs like she did. He doesn't care who he has to hurt to do it." The captain's phone rang again. This time it was Agent Parker. "Captain, we found something at the 2nd cemetery." Another phone, but this message is different. "Sterling says they'll release one location for every hospital board member we arrest. He says they're all part of it. They approve his research funding and help him find buyers." "It's a trap," Sarah said weakly. "He's trying to buy time to move the other victims. We need to find his main operations center. Everything must go through one place." Jenny was still looking through the property records. "There's one more cemetery on this list. It's not marked as active, but..." She stopped, staring at the screen. "It's right next to Sterling's private medical research facility, and satellite images show fresh dirt and new roses planted there last week." Captain Thompson grabbed his coat. "That's it. That's where he's keeping them. Rodriguez," he spoke into the phone, "get your team to this address. But be careful. Sterling's not just going to give up his garden. He'll do anything to protect it." The race was on, but as they rushed to the final cemetery, none of them knew that Dr. Sterling had one more terrible secret waiting to be discovered. The morning sun rose over City Central Hospital as police cars surrounded the building. Detective Sarah Chen, now fully recovered, stood at the entrance wearing her badge again. It had been 3 months since they had found her in that coffin, and today was the day everything would end. "All teams in position." Detective Mike Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. He was leading one of 6 police teams placed around the hospital. They had learned their lesson. Dr. Sterling wouldn't escape this time. Sarah touched the small scar on her arm where the tracking chip had been. "Remember," she spoke into her radio, "Sterling has friends inside. Trust no one except our own teams." The hospital's front doors opened. Dr. Marcus Sterling walked out, wearing his white coat and carrying his usual black medical bag. He looked calm, as if this was just another normal day. But Sarah could see his eyes moving quickly, counting the police cars. "Dr. Sterling," Sarah called out, her voice strong and clear. "You're under arrest." Sterling smiled, the same kind smile he probably gave his patients. Detective Chen, you're looking much better than the last time I saw you. How did you enjoy your time in my garden? Before Sarah could answer, Sterling dropped his bag and started running toward the parking garage. But Mike's team was waiting there. As Sterling turned to find another escape route, he saw police officers at every exit. "It's over, Doctor," Sarah said, walking closer. "We found your other gardens. All 5 detectives are safe. Your buyers have been arrested. The hospital board members are confessing everything." Sterling's smile disappeared. "You don't understand," he said, his voice getting angry. "I was saving lives. Do you know how many people die waiting for organs? I found a way to save them. By burying other people alive," Mike asked, putting handcuffs on Sterling. "By kidnapping detectives and keeping them like spare parts?" Just then, FBI agent Parker's car arrived. She got out holding a laptop. "We found his secret files," she announced. Everything was hidden in the hospital's computer system. Names of buyers, records of sales, locations of all of his gardens, and something else, plans for 20 more burial sites. Sarah walked up to Sterling, looking him in the eyes. "Your wife's death was tragic, but it didn't give you the right to play God with other people's lives." Sterling's face changed. For the first time, he looked scared. "How did you figure it all out?" "Your roses," Sarah answered. "You planted them for Helen, didn't you? At her grave. Then at each victim's grave. A garden of life, you called it. But gardens are meant to help things grow, not hide your crimes." Officer Jenny Martinez came running from the hospital. "We found his hidden lab," she called out. "And we got Dr. Phillips in custody." She was about to delete all the computer files. Dr. Amanda Phillips had been Sterling's main helper, the one who monitored the buried detectives and maintained their life support systems. With her arrest, the last piece of Sterling's operation was shut down. 1 month later, Sarah stood in front of a group of reporters. Behind her was a sign reading Regional Task Force on Medical Crimes. Captain Thompson had put her in charge of the new unit. Today, Dr. Marcus Sterling and 15 other people were found guilty of kidnapping, illegal organ trafficking, and attempted murder, she announced. They will spend the rest of their lives in prison. The money from their organ sales has been used to create a legal organ donor program, one that will help people without hurting others. After the press conference, Mike found Sarah looking at a photo of all 6 rescued detectives. They had taken it at their first reunion, all of them alive and healthy. "Still having the nightmares?" Mike asked gently. Sarah shook her head. "Not anymore, but I keep thinking about something Sterling said at his trial. He thought he was doing the right thing, helping people who needed organs. He just couldn't see how wrong his methods were." "That's why we have cops like you," Mike said, putting a hand on her shoulder. "To stop people who think the end justifies the means." Sarah smiled and took one last look at the photo before putting it in her desk. Tomorrow, she would start working on her next case. But tonight, she was going to plant some new flowers in her garden at home. Not roses, but sunflowers. Because sometimes the best way to heal is to help something beautiful grow in the right way.